So that lifestyle is ultimately where you see yourself perhaps in retirement or post-work, or how long you want to work for, working for a job versus the job working for you. And that lifestyle is where you picture yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. So I think a lot of people maybe look at that, and they look at the short-term goal within 5 years, and they forget about the rest because they think the rest is just going to follow on. I'm sure you're going to drill down a little bit more into that, but I think it's very important just to help people understand that lifestyle is ultimately where you are at those stages through your life. Would that be
absolutely spot on? Yeah. Nailed that in a nutshell. And it's I guess I'm an ex-architect, and I know you're a graphic designer years ago, so I think it's almost innate in both of us to be able to imagine very vividly how we want things to look and be. But for a lot of people, and I've spoken to thousands of investors over the years now, when I ask the question, what's your perfect life look like? Very few can give me any sort of answer. In fact, the general response is, well, no one's actually asked me that and I've never thought about it. So I'm really going to challenge everyone listening in today to take some time. And I've, in my book, The Freedom Formula, I devote a whole chapter to getting clear on your why, your values, and your vision. And I give my own example plus a bunch of other examples of the fun process that you can have in doing it. And it's not something you just do once. I mean, Sonia and I do this every year because as part of that GPS, we check back in. What's changed in our life? What's changed in our portfolio? Do we need to restructure the finances and what does that mean to us in terms of what we need to be doing from this point? So that becomes the real magnet, but it's then informed by the finance strategy, which determines capacity, and those two then drive and direct the property strategy that falls out of us. So let's drill into those and get into the nitty-gritties, because I've got sort of put together a case study of a typical Aussie hardworking investor family and what that means to them in that context. So what I'm going to do there, I'm going to drill into just to run through the scope of what we're going to touch on today. We're going to start with that lifestyle strategy in terms of where are you heading, what do you want to do. We're then going to look at the capacity strategy through the finance element in terms of what can you do, and we're going to apply what I call the bare facts approach to that. So, and that's Grizzly Bear. So if you break Grizzly Bear down, the bear is B for borrowing, Z for equity, A for affordability, and R for risk. Those two then will then really drive what you're doing in the property arena. So let's jump in and get into that. And it's important to say right from the get-go that everything I'm talking about in the frameworks that I've developed comes straight out of my book, The Freedom Formula, which has been in play for quite some time. And that's built around 8 key principles in a 6-step process, which I call the property well process. It's something that's worked extremely well for my good wife, Sonia, and I, and the couple of thousand investors we've helped over the last 20 years. And I'll be breaking down the first 3 components of that 6-step process as we go through today. So jumping into that, where I always start with people, Mish, and this is probably something that you talk to investors about as well, is do you want to be rich or do you want to be wealthy? Because it's a big difference between the two.
Yes.
And most Aussies are rich. We've got great incomes which allow us to enjoy great lifestyles. But if that work income turned off today, most Aussies couldn't afford to sustain their current lifestyle for much more than days or weeks. Some months, very, very few years. So for me, investing in property is not about property or the money. It's actually about time, because you're not really wealthy until you've got time on your hands and you can devote your time to doing what you like, when you like, with who you like, where you like, without your income needs requiring you to generate them. So there's a big difference between being rich today and wealthy long term. And as I say, the key element of that is time. For me, it's always been about time. I want to free up time to do stuff like this, talking with you today, and having the assets that are going to give us the residual income that's going to look after our financial needs while we're putting our energy into things that are really important. So that's key. So jumping into the lifestyle strategy is part 1. And again, just echoing that 6-part process that we talk about on the property wealth cycle. then what I normally see, and I want to compare this to what I see a lot of people doing, and a lot of people rock up to talk to someone about property, and you ask them why you're investing in property, and I generally get the following answers. I want to make more money. I want to save some tax. I want to retire a bit earlier and a bit more comfortably. I want to secure my family's future. And I want to get 10 properties in 10 years, which excuse my French, I refer to as the biggest ego syndrome that I get to see if you're a Monty Python fan. For me, all of those answers are just a dream wish list. They're a bunch of motherhood statements that don't mean anything. We need to define, in real terms, the why, the what, the who, the when, and the how. And that's going to then drive the type of approach you need to take to property. Where I normally start, as I mentioned earlier, Mish, is with the question, how much is enough? How much is enough for you to live the way you want? Because once you've attained that, the rest is frivolous. I saw my good father working himself to death, chasing money, and I saw his body fall to bits in the process, and he died far younger than he should have done, and he spent the last 10 years of his life dribbling out the side of his mouth in a wheelchair with mum looking after him. And that's because he never put some time into working out how much is enough to live the way he wanted.
I guess that just goes back to what we've spoken about before, which is focus on the end first. Focus on the end in mind and work backwards that way. So it falls smack into what you're talking about, those three elements of working out.
Spot on. And I guess the key elements there are really spend some time contemplating what's your why. What really turns the lights on for you? What do you get really excited about? And that needs to be underpinned by getting really clear on what your values are. Because a lot of people don't even know what their own values are. And if you don't do things in accordance with their values, and you'll shipwreck yourself without knowing it. And those two then inform what your life vision needs to look like. So I'm going to encourage everyone to spend some time, take a day out with your wife or partner or whatever it might be, and really have some fun putting some colour around what your perfect day, week, month, year looks like. Because once you've got a clear understanding of that and you're excited about it, then two things happen. You'll walk over broken glass to make it happen. So you'll have the persistence and persistence to stay the course. But also, it's very easy then to monetize that and work out how much that lifestyle costs per year, which will then determine what sort of income-producing nest egg you need to create. And once you know what nest egg you need to create over what timeline, then it's pretty easy to craft a property strategy that you need to implement to make that happen. So again, as you said, start with the end in mind and start on that journey and get very visual with it. What I'm showing on the screen now is the vision board I put together back in the late 90s, Mish.
Wow.
As I say, I'm a very visual person, always have been.
Yes.
But what's really interesting is that, and I'm one of those nutcases who had it on the toilet door and in the shower, there's 6 places around the house. I still have it, actually. That I referred to, and it almost becomes subliminal. But if you are referencing that direction often enough, then it's amazing how those things start to come into your life. And you're almost, by subconscious, are attracted to making it happen. So just about everything on that board has actually occurred for Sonia and I. About the only thing I haven't ticked yet is singing with Sting. I'm a mad Sting fan, Mish. So if you know anyone that knows Sting, let me know. I might end up in a wheelchair myself by the time I'm doing some a cappella with him. But that's still on the goal list to do that at some point down the track.
You know what they say, if you don't reach high, you'll never get to leave the ground. So you got to reach high. You got to keep that dream going. You never know, Sting might come knocking on your door one night.
Absolutely. You just never know how that's going to happen. Because I guess the key there is once you're clear on that vision, as I say, you've got a sense of how much that lifestyle costs, then you can start plotting out the freedom numbers, as I call them. And just to put some context around that, Mish, there's been a lot of work done on this by myself and others over the years. What is a reasonable income that's going to sustain a comfortable lifestyle? If you look at the Australian Superannuation Federation's numbers, the age pension at the moment for a couple is worth about $35,000 a year. Well, without boring you, that's a very lean existence.
Skinny. That is very, very skinny.
Very skinny indeed. They say that a comfortable existence is around 80 grand a year. I would tend to differ. I mean, I've sat down and budgeted this, and I think to have a reasonable existence where you can have an overseas holiday and a couple of interstate holidays, eat out regularly, a decent car, enjoy some good wine and clothes and a decent haircut, frequent leisure activity, not have to worry about the heating and cooling bills at home, and being able to renovate and update your home every 20 years, along with the old private health insurance. That's a minimum of about 120 grand a year for a couple, and that's assuming that they've got no home loan at that point in time. So in today's dollars, about 120 grand for a couple is the minimum you should be thinking about. But I, again, challenge the listeners to dive in a bit deeper and have a really good look at how they like to live, because what I want to do now is actually work through an example of a couple. And I'm just going to call them being mythical. This couple doesn't exist, so I need to stress that. And we're talking about Jessica and Michael. They are a couple. Jessica's the maid breadwinner. She's a senior civil engineer with a consulting firm. Michael, and she's earning 195 grand a year. Michael works part-time and spends a lot more time with their two kids to support Jessica and her endeavours. He's a public servant that works 0.6 FTE, and he's earning 75 grand a year. In terms of their assets, they've got about Jessica's got about 140 grand in super. Michael's got about 95 in super. They've got savings sitting in their offset account against a home loan of about 90 grand, and their home's currently worth about 1.2 mil. In terms of liabilities, they've got a home loan of about 615,000. They've got a credit card with a 10 grand limit, and they've got a couple of kids in there that they're not quite into their teens at this point in time. So using them as a sort of starting point, and sitting down with them to get them to work through the guys. And again, before I do that, for anyone who would like to put some shape around your why, I'm happy to offer Chapter 14 of the Freedom Formula for anyone who emails you, Mish. It takes you through the process. You can have some fun with it and start to put some shape around it. So anyone who wants to do that, happy for them to either email you or email me.
That's fine. So. I'd love to see what that is. So if anybody would like that off that Bushy's making, feel free to send it through to us at sales@revolvecommercial.com.au, and we'll send that back to you.